Excellent. Right, well, welcome back, everybody. My apologies for the short delay. I had a couple of issues I had to address. Recommencing, therefore, our agenda today, and the item we're to start with is the scope for Draft Plan Change 21 and issues and options for Draft Plan Change 26. So let me just see who we have here. We have Jo Cook-Munro, I believe. I can't see. Oh, yeah, I see you. Good morning, Jo. How are you?
I'm good, guys. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Now, so this is in connection with the two draft plan changes. Take it away.
Yes. I wanted to put this before the committee just to illustrate where we're at with both of the plan changes. So for Plan Change 21, originally that was going to be our intensification plan change, but with the new Enabling Housing Supply Act coming out, we've had to change it, and it's basically narrowed in scope, and it's going to be focused on the development of inclusionary zoning and affordable housing provisions within our district plan, based on the recommendations of David Mead from Hill, Young and Cooper. We are proposing to investigate the rezoning of selected large lot residential zones into general residential zones, and the growth cells that Mr. Mead has recommended are T6 and C11. We are also looking at reviewing the urban design assessment criteria in the district plan and actually strengthening that. If we're going to be intensifying housing, good urban design will be essential to ensure a good quality of living for our new residents. And then there is likely to be consequential amendments that come out of the changes we've made. So that's essentially the proposed scope of Plan Change 21 moving forward. For Plan Change 26, I put forward three options. Option one is do nothing. It's not a viable option, but it is an option. Option two is to do a basic plan change. So all we're doing is putting the medium density residential standards into the district plan, and we're doing nothing else. If this option is preferred by the committee, it does mean we do not look at any qualifying matters, and it means that all relevant residential zones within the Cambridge, Te Awamutu and Kihi urban boundaries basically will be rezoned so they can do the 3 times 3 story housing. And option three is to actually do a comprehensive plan change. So we look at qualifying matters such as Te Turu Whamoana, the flood hazard zoning, designations, character areas, notable trees, infrastructure capacity and restraints, and we use the qualifying matters that we have access to under the Enabling Housing Act to exempt areas of Cambridge, Te Awamutu and Kihi from the new medium density residential standards. At the same time, we would also be looking to start introducing the definitions from the national planning standards into our district plan, and reformatting some of the chapters to match the national planning standards for consistency. So if you have read the accompanying issues and options paper, I've outlined what is required under the Enabling Housing Act, what qualifying matters we can rely on, and then I've gone through the options. So option two is a slightly cheaper option. Option three is more expensive, but we have got funding for this financial year, next financial year, from what I think is called a loan reserve. So we do have the funding there, and we have started to get investigations into qualifying matters underway. So essentially what I would like the committee to do is indicate to me how they want to proceed for both Plan Change 21 and Plan Change 26.
Okay, thanks, Joe. It's a pretty good summary of your paper. Thank you very much. Roger, have you a question for Joe? You're muted, Roger. We can't hear you.
I'd moved the mouse down, but I forgot to click it. A comment and a question, but I'll make the comment first. I certainly support option 3 and plan change 26. I still think that making it just a blanket change for medium density really will open up to losing some of the character, and I'm talking particularly about Cambridge here, of course, where we've got some very, very strong character streets, and I certainly think that I'd prefer to see some ability to maintain the character in those areas. So I certainly would go for option 3. In terms of just the question, the medium density, is that the medium density as defined by Futureproof, say 20-25 units per hectare?
No, the medium density is defined by the Act as 3 times 3-storey houses on a site.
Okay, but the future-proof tools that they're putting in is suggesting the density of 20-25 for both brownfield and greenfield. And although that hasn't been adopted, it is in the proposed future-proof document. Would that not impact our medium density definition, because that would be a regional planning document which would take precedence over our district plan?
The medium density residential standards come from an Act, so the Act will take precedence over any regional planning documents. The standards are actually defined and set out in the Resource Management Enabling Housing Supply and Other Matters Amendment Act 2021. So it's basically, we take those standards from a schedule and we drop them into our district plan.
So you're saying that they're defined by the 3x3 ability, 3 stories, 3 units on
Yes.
a section. What does that relate to in terms of a density per hectare?
I have not worked that out yet.
I can probably help, Joe. So I don't think it's defined in the Act, Councillor Gordon, around what the density per hectare is, but what they do is site coverage. So it's not only the 3x3, but there's a site coverage limit on each section as well. We haven't done that analysis, and I don't recall, Joe, that they had a per hectare standard in the Act either.
No, they didn't.
Yeah, okay. It just seems that lacks definition, doesn't it? And it could have a far bigger implication. There's under option 2, and I know it's an extreme, but there's nothing to stop every section in a hectare having that 3x3 and the site coverage imposed in an area. So we'd have no control.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. While I am doing this plan change, I am constantly at the Ministry for the Environment about the plan change and the unintended implication it has on councils such as Waipa, because we are purely caught up because of our proximity to Hamilton City. We've just received urban design guidelines, which we were told would help provide us with provisions that could go into our plan change so that, we had an acceptable standard of living with green spaces and stuff. The guidelines are of no help whatsoever. They're so aspirational, they're not able to be achieved at all. So yeah, I can't say I totally agree with the plan change, but I just want to do the best I can for Waipa, as the district I live in and as the council I work for.
I think if it helps, practically what's likely to happen is if they meet the site coverage standards, then there'll be a permitted activity, no resource consent required. Practically, and we're doing this analysis now, so we've got market economics who's doing some analysis for us. There won't probably be that many residential sections that actually have 50% site coverage that allows full development of 3 houses. So what we are anticipating is that it's more likely, and this is what Ministry of Housing and Urban Development have told us as well, it's more likely that there'll be second units or tiny houses or that type of configuration that people will take the advantage of. And so if they do breach that, I think it's 50% site coverage, then they're into a discretionary resource consent process that we have the ability to then assess and decline or grant based on the merits. So I think the perception is kind of a blanket 3x3 on every single residential section is not going to be the reality that we see, but there is certainly an erosion of urban character risk that we're seeing as well.
Yeah, so there's 2 points that come out of that discussion. One is that we actually have no choice because we're being instructed to do this by a central government. And secondly, the only way that we're going to retain some modicum of control is to go for option 3.
Yes.
I don't think there's a decision. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. Jim, Lou, then Mike.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Look, just quickly, and I didn't declare it at the beginning of the meeting, and I possibly should have. In terms of Plan Change 21, I'd just declare an interest, although we're only talking in generalities, but just because of where I live. So when we get to the resolution, I just want to stand aside from the recommendation B. But look, from a substantive point of view, I just agree with Roger's comments. Really, we've just got to go for option 3 and give ourselves as much opportunity as we can to protect our existing residences, as well as providing for future housing. That's obviously critical as well, but it shouldn't be at the expense of our existing amenity values and standard of living that's been enjoyed, I suppose, by our residents up until now. So look, I'm certainly very much in favour of going for option 3 and taking every opportunity we can to try and control this blanket requirement. And although comments are coming out from central government that it's not likely to happen on every section, on every street, if it happens next door to you, then there's going to be some real kickbacks from the community, and I would suggest rightly so. And the 50% site coverage isn't really going to protect people, in my view, because in fact it'll force people to actually go up. And it's the cost of sections. If people can buy an existing section in a developed part of our urban areas and effectively get rid of the existing house and build 3 houses on it, that's very likely to happen just because of pure economics of it. So look, I think we've got to take the opportunities we've been given. I don't think it'll resolve the issue, but hand on heart, when we're talking to our community, we've got to say we've done the best for them.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. You know, there's a certain irony in this. In the course of some of the work that Graham Pollard's actually doing with on the environment strategy for council, some of the feedback we've been getting from some of the school children and the youth is that they want big backyards to run around in. So, you know, there's a real clash of perspectives and views and aspirations there. So anyway,
just on that, Susan, just quickly, if I could add, and following on from that, that's exactly the situation we've got. We're talking about trying to control climate change. You get rid of trees inside of an urban area because of intensification. And there's talk about lifting temperatures by 3 or 4 degrees without the green coverage that we've got in our urban areas. It's just a knee-jerk reaction, and it's not looking at the big picture at all. So, as you say, trying to create open spaces for kids, or even adults for that matter, it's not just kids, it's just retrofitting that in a brownfield situation is going to be a nightmare.
Absolutely. And if I can just pretend to be Hazel for a moment, you all know she would start talking about the health and well-beings of our community, and particularly mental health issues in smaller living environments. So yeah, I'm trying to channel my inner Hazel. Anyway, Lou.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just quickly, I totally agree with what Roger just said earlier, but I just want to ask a couple of questions. With option 3 and the qualifying matters, do we have the ability to sort of regulate things like permeable surfaces or anything along that line? Do we actually have the ability to charge DCs for the extra infrastructure that we need to place on these so-called developments? If it had 3 houses on where there was a single house, we will need more sewage, we will need more infrastructure in place. And we need to also have DCs. These people do not have green space or lawns. And do we get a DC from them to subsidise or build or create a green space? All of these things need to be tied together. To me, the whole thing seems quite nebulous. And the fact that we've been caught in this tier 1 as rural residentials, really. We are small towns. It seems to be quite an anomaly, but I'll leave it at that at the moment. That's my dialogue.
Part of draft plan change 26 will be a review of our financial contributions. So they're not talking development contributions for funding, they're talking financial contributions for funding. So we will have that ability. Yeah.
Will that be able to, what I'm saying, will we be able to charge the full impact, or would we be limited to a proportion? And how do we justify this? And yeah, the whole thing sort of worries me a little bit.
Yeah, we are doing a review of our infrastructure and identifying capacity and where new infrastructure will be needed, infrastructure that needs upgrading. So that is going to provide some justification for financial contributions. We haven't got down to the detail yet, but it's very much front of mind how we're going to fund this, because both the Ministry for the Environment and the Ministry for Housing and Urban Development has indicated that us saying we don't have money will not wash with the Minister if we do not do the medium density residential standards in our district plan.
Just to finish off my particular issue on this was that that's all very fine, but we have to actually increase the size of a pipe, for example, a stormwater or a sewage pipe, which will actually have quite some massive effect on our budgets at the future time. You know, you can charge the DC for the local area, but what do we do? Because we've got 3 miles of pipe to replace to get to the next pumping station.
Yeah, so just to pick up on Joe's point about the financial contributions, they're different. They're done under the RMA, DCs under the Government Act. DCs are for planned infrastructure. Financial contributions are for unplanned infrastructure. So that's the exact reason we have FCs. And they can extend downstream. They can extend off the site of development.
Good.
So that's what we're looking at. So at the moment, our financial contributions are pretty tight in our district plan. We don't tend to use them, because until now we've been relying on development agreements, infrastructure work agreements. But I think more and more we'll be able to look at our financial contributions and probably update them and look at downstream effects and build that in. So we can certainly do that.
Thank you very much for that, Tony. That's really appreciated.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. Mike, then Liz.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, I totally agree with, through the chair, I totally agree with everything that's been saying, including that option 3 around that plan change 26. I guess, you know, one of the fundamental rationales that this has come into play is, and Susan, you've got a backdrop photo that sort of sums this up. If this was Pukekohe or something, you know, but it's down here, but you can see fertile land in that background, and of course that's largely where it's come from. So it's opportunity cost of whatever is done is the way I see this. If we continue going the way we're going, and obviously I would say Auckland's a big driver for this around the horticultural area, agricultural area, is you keep using this fertile land by spreading out. There is still a cost, there's still a social cost and an economic cost. So whichever way you go here, there is going to be a cost, and I think that's how the government's looked at it. So to me, I see this as a very long game. This is not the here and now. This is over the next sort of 100 years. I would hope the government's looking at this. And yes, I do see there is going to be impact. But look, in developed nations, and we're a pretty, 5 million people over quite a big area of land. You go to many countries around the world and there is intensification. And most of us, probably all of us have been to these places. And these people survive, and we're not going to become a London, that's for sure. But there are plenty of cities around the world that have got intensification like we're talking about, but their green spaces are used very well, and I guess people find other ways, mechanisms of keeping their whole order or well-being intact. So I don't see this as a total negative. I see this as part of progress of a country that's really, from settlement, only a couple of hundred, well, not even a couple of hundred years old. So I take a slightly different view, but I understand all that has been said. I mean, yes, I understand too. If it was built next to me, how would I feel? So I think that option 3, as Jim's alluded to and others, and Roger, it gives us the best option to influence at least something. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. It's certainly a perspective to consider for sure. Liz.
Thank you, Susan. Hey, look, this item, I guess, I've always had a distaste for this right from the very start. I guess as a Cambridge Ward councillor, I've always felt really uncomfortable with how this is going to affect our urban character. And I think there's a real risk here as well, that we just kind of go along with what, central government are potentially asking of us at times. We've seen already examples where our community has pushed back hard and been really uncomfortable with some of the intensification in Cambridge in particular. I'm not adverse to pushing back a little, but I guess I just encourage staff to use every single tool they possibly can to protect what we have. We've got 2 large towns that are growing by the second. They will become cities, no doubt, it's still many years away, but they're growing. And we want to just maintain their individuality and their character. So somehow or another, we need to really protect that. So yes, agree with option number 3, but I'm pretty reluctant. I really am. But what other options are there, I guess, in pushing back? That's probably my question to staff.
I guess if it helps, really good points. What I think we're trying to achieve is really good outcomes here. So we're kind of forced, like all Tier 1 councils, to do this. And probably there are 2 examples I'm thinking of in Cambridge where they're the kind of outcomes that, however we can introduce this into the plan change, we should. And one is Cambridge Park, where you've got the oval in the centre. If you've been there, you've got some relatively high density. I'm not sure what the height of some of those townhouse units are, but they'd probably be consistent with medium density residential standards. So what you've got there is an open space surrounded by higher density, as Councillor Pettit said. That's kind of common overseas. And the other one that you haven't seen yet, which has been granted, I think it got granted as a non-notified application, is Cambridge North. So that's one of Kevin Honus's development. It's 3 stories. It's apartment units. That will be on the corner of Terry Came Drive. And that passed all the tests in terms of urban design. We've got a very experienced developer there. So they're the kind of outcomes, I think, that we should be driving towards, and that's not everywhere in every single residential zone. They're at places where they're appropriate. So that's what we're trying to achieve, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. Philip.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Just carrying on from what Tony just said, and sort of what I was sort of saying the other day about Cambridge North. The developer there is really trying to keep within the style of Cambridge, and we're very lucky to have people like that. So, the medical centre on Victoria Road and Norfolk Drive that's being developed, or the groundwork's been done now, That's going to be a phenomenal facility, but the building itself is ultra modern, and whether it's too modern for Cambridge, I'm not sure, but I know the developer's commented several times on that building. He's in favour of the development, but Kevin does very much keep the work that he does, keep it in theme of our town. So it's really great to see that happening in Cambridge North. So.
Thanks, Philip. Andrew.
Thanks, Susan. I just wanted a quick comment in favour of, to support what Mike was saying. I agree with, I'm certainly in favour of option 3, but our towns do need to intensify. The quality soils is one aspect, but also effective public transport. We need intensification for that to happen. So as well as a lot of other good things that will come out of intensifying, but certainly retaining the feel and quality of our towns is important, of course.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Jo, did you have something to respond?
Just make a comment. We're currently working with comms to put up a web page for Plan Change 26. So that will be going live in the next couple of days. Also, just to put out there for your consideration is when we notify this on the 20th of August, no submissions can be received on the medium density residential standards from the public. As soon as we notify those standards, they are deemed live. The only submissions we can receive will be on any changes to our financial contributions chapter and any of the qualifying matters that we identify, or areas where we're proposing a lesser density than that proposed by the medium density residential standard. So we are going to be updating the web page consistently and try and keep people informed on that. We've got a really good person, Kate Stace from Comms, who is working with us on that. So we'll be trying our best to get the key messaging out there and consistent before we notify.
Thanks, Jo. Claire.
Yeah, thanks. Well, Jo, you've made a good point about what can be submitted on, and so I'm hoping that that messaging from comms is going to be extremely clear, that it's important that if people do want to submit, they can only submit on these particular points. They can't do it on the medium density standards themselves. I was also going to have a question to you about the next plan change that's going to have inclusionary zoning, because obviously that's a provision that's been applied elsewhere in the country and has been able to achieve affordable housing outcomes and things, but I do know it's been challenged in the courts, and I just wondered if you've had any assurance from central government that that's less likely to happen, because perhaps they are putting it out there that that's a policy that they're expecting to see communities adopt.
Okay, I'm sorry, Claire, could you just repeat the question?
Yes, so it's to do with the inclusionary zoning proposals that are going to be, is it Plan Change 26, I think?
21.
21, sorry. That they have been challenged in the courts by developers in New Zealand. And so I don't want to see us having to go down that pathway as well. And I was hoping that there has been an assurance from central government that they are perhaps making it clear that that's an expectation, that that kind of policy needs to be enacted, needs to be adopted by communities, by councils, so that those affordable housing outcomes can be achieved.
I belong to a working group that is working on inclusionary zoning and affordable housing. they're campaigning very hard.
Mm.
So they're made up of community housing groups, a government department and councils, but no assurance from the council, from the government to date on that.
It's my understanding too. So last time last information I had was that Treasury and Department of Internal Affairs are very reluctant to buy into inclusionary zoning because it's a big political fight that they'll buy. And they're pushing that down to local authorities to have that fight. So yeah, I think Joe's absolutely right that government's just stepping right back is what we're seeing from inclusionary zoning.
Yeah, well, I'm really worried about that because I don't want to see a great effort having to be put into defending that provision in the courts. Because I mean, you're right. I mean, it's a provision that reduces the profitability of developers, and it's difficult to justify. I suppose you're benefiting a certain sector of the community, and why should that be the case, you know? And then there's another part to this question in a way, and that is, can we as a council just rely on district plan provisions to achieve affordable housing in our communities? Surely we need to be, because that's quite a passive approach. And I think we need to be seen to be pursuing more active actions as well, initiatives. For instance, saying that, yes, we're doing inclusionary zoning, but we're also developing relationships with community housing providers. We are looking at whether it's a community lands trust or other mechanisms that sort of set up one-on-one, you know, like with some of the more philanthropic funders that we have relationships with, so that we can actually have some of these projects progressing, you know, without delay, because it is it's a crisis now. We can't wait 5 years to solve it. We need to be taking action now.
So I think you're correct. It is the full package. District plans are quite a course, and you know, you've heard the blunt instrument before. And in answer, I suppose, to the question, can we do anything without inclusionary zoning in a district plan? Probably not, because we are reliant on, I suppose, developers to voluntarily meet the market at a price point that they might be taking not a loss, but a reduced profit. So that's really something to keep in our minds, is that working with the development community, you will hear that they will run at a loss if they offer affordable housing. What they actually run at is a reduced profit. In terms of inclusionary zoning, so we'll be doing due diligence as part of the Section 32, and Joe will be leading that. We'll be getting legal advice, but also we'll be borrowing, because councils are pretty good at doing this, from Queenstown Lakes District Council experience. We'll be seeing what provisions they're putting in. And the process they went through, and as far as we can, if we think that that's relevant and appropriate for Waipa, then we'd look at including those. But yeah, exactly understand that we don't want to buy a big legal fight either.
Yeah, and no, that's great, Tony. I mean, we need to have really good information, and I do know that discussion paper that was circulated, not in this agenda package, but earlier, it did analyse the bottom lines for developers when inclusionary zoning was introduced, and it said that what's the outcome generally is that land prices reduce for development packages, and so in fact overall the developers' margins aren't impacted that greatly. Yeah, which I thought was really encouraging.
Thanks, Claire. It's obvious that this is quite a concerning kind of development, I suppose, which we're somewhat tied by the hands. I wonder if, given the importance of this issue, and it's pretty emotive for both towns, whether, and given the sort of strong messaging we've been getting from elected members today, whether we would feel comfortable having a closer oversight over the comms that you speak of, Joe, going out to our community, because I think it's really important that we have an understanding of what's going to our community and an approval of those sorts of messages rather. So does that find any favour with people? Because I just, it's just such a crucial piece of work. I think we need to be pretty all on the same page around what goes out and how those conversations take place with our residents. Yeah. Great.
Certainly accommodate that. How, can I just check, how would you like that to happen? So we've got the comms at the moment. We'll be doing a technical staff review. Would you like to review that as chairman of the SPMP as well?
Well, I think if we can cast it a bit further afield, obviously Mayor, Deputy Mayor, maybe myself, and if we can, review this comm strategy and the collateral and stuff that goes out before it goes out, I think it would be helpful. Are you comfortable to do that, Jim and Liz?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, look, I guess we've seen some of the complaints and the grievances have come from our community already around some developments that have happened, particularly in Cambridge. And I guess we just need to make sure we get this right. So yeah, really supportive of that. Thanks, Susan.
Thank you. We can build that in.
Excellent. You're comfortable with that, Mayor Jim? Excellent. Great. Okay, look, so I think we've probably discussed this one reasonably comprehensively. So if we can then turn our minds then to those recommendations appearing on page 166, obviously the first one as it relates to Plan Change 26, and the second one was in respect, 21, and then the second one in respect of 26. Obviously, Mayor Jim, you alluded to a perception of potential conflict over 21, so block your ears, keep your hands down and away from your mute button. Do I have anybody who's happy to move and second those? Mike is happy to move. Roger will second those. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Thanks very much, Tony and Joe. It's a pretty tricky area. It's a tightrope you're walking. So thank you for your work there. And Joe, yours is the next one. So welcome back. The District Plan Work Programme.
Yeah, quite excited because I'm out of the yellow pages now and into the public arena, which is cool.
Yeah.
So the main changes to the work program is we are still working with ISAVIS to come up with a solution to migrate our GIS information over into the ePlan forum. Amy Wallace is doing that, doing a really good job. We have pointed out to ISAVIS that it's now somewhat urgent given the number of plan changes that will be coming out in the next 6 months. And the other thing you would have noticed is that the work program table has now been ordered in priority. So we have the top three, 26, 21 and 17. They were all underway. 17 is overdue. Plan change 26 is the mandatory plan change and the intensification plan change. We've then got the airport plan change as a second priority along with Carter's Flat, and then we go to plan change 22 and 23 as the third priority. The location of the Papakainga plan change as a 3 rather than a 1 is due to resourcing and the policy team at the moment. I am doing bits and pieces of work on it when I get a moment. So it's basically ready for our new policy planner once they're on board to pick up and run with. So I know it's a priority. I'm very aware it's a priority. I'm just trying to juggle a workload that I've got at the moment, being the only person in the team and having limited budget to get things done.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Mayor Jim.
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. Look, Joe, and I know I appreciate the work pressures that you're under, but this the Papakainga change has been around for, well, since I've been mayor anyway, and probably before that, and we don't seem to be making any progress. And this is one of the issues that really is impacting on getting housing going. And I suppose the question I've got is, how much is it going to cost to get the resourcing so that we can move this along? And maybe council's just got to stump up and find the resourcing, because I can just see this just dragging on, and we're losing face, I suppose, with our iwi partners on this, because it's just been on our agenda for so long and there's been no progress whatsoever. And trying to resolve this housing issue, apart from particularly Maori housing in this circumstance, but it will have an impact on all of our housing if we can start making provision for additional areas for housing for Papakainga. So I'm just wondering, how can we help you move it along? If it's additional resources you need, then give us a figure and let's talk about that.
I'm happy to respond to that, Mayor. So I guess part of the challenge that we've got is the competitive labour market. So since Julie left, we've gone out 3 times to advertise for her role, unsuccessfully 3 times. We're competing with senior, I think there's about 3 senior policy recruitment vacancies in Waikato District and about 4 or 5 in the Waikato Regional Council, and they can't fill them. So that's probably the first thing, is that even if we had more money to get more resource, we just can't find the people. And that's the story up and down the country, because we've been given things like this Plan Change 26 that we have to put a lot of effort into. So that's probably the first point. The second point is we are actively recruiting at the moment. We are looking at bringing someone on. So really the hold up for us is having the extra person that's already funded. But it's just been able to find them. We could potentially bring on some consultancy to do it, but we're finding the same thing with that. So getting good consultants is really becoming a struggle. And then we still need someone on staff to project manage them. So there's then a load there too. So I guess what more could be done? The only way I could see forward is if there could be some additional budget that we could look at trying to get a consultant. That's the only thing that comes to my mind. Our budget for this financial year is fully allocated. We did the budgeting yesterday for Plan Change 26, and that's pretty much fully allocated with the resourcing that we think we need. So that would probably be the way that we could advance it. But again, there's probably a 6-week lead in at least to getting the funding, to getting someone started.
That's a real hard one to try and fix. A real hard one, isn't it? There's not the expertise there up and down the country. Wayne, did you want to add something?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just following on from Tony's observations, which are quite correct. But Mayor Jim is absolutely 100% correct. This matter has been hanging around for some time. In fact, it was given a priority. It would be actioned if we hadn't got the government mandates to do the various plan change work. But what I'll do to give some confidence in the space is I'll raise it at the executive meeting to see if we can cut some funds. So we'll just need to understand the cost to implement the plan change, and whether we've got some funds, whether it's some cash surplus or wherever, to employ a consultant to commence the plan change. So that's my commitment there, Your Worship, and I'll see if we can provide some funds to do that. And that really, I guess, follows on from Tony's advice about the best way forward to progress.
Yeah, thank you, Wayne. Jim, did you want to respond to that before we go to Mariata?
Look, appreciate that. I think we just need to know what it's going to cost and how we're going to do it, because as I say, to me, it's just dragged on for far too long, and it's impacting on housing affordability across the board, really. So just can't afford to delay. So thanks for taking that on board, Wayne. And we just need to, as I say, from a council perspective, to know what it's going to cost and how we're going to do it, and we'll have to make that decision if it needs more funding. Yeah, thanks, Susan.
Thanks, Jim. Mariata. You're on mute, Mariata.
Sorry. Thanks everyone. Thanks, Jim, for your comments, and Wayne for your response to that as well. I just, from my position, I just absolutely support what Jim has said, and if we can find the funding, the best way forward, there's always a solution. We just need to make this a priority, I guess. Yeah, because these are good quick runs on the board, and empowering at the same time for our people. So yeah, Kate and Mahia too. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mariata. I mean, although we've obviously got the issue in terms of resource, it ultimately comes to priorities, doesn't it? And how that's ranked. So thank you, Wayne, for agreeing to go back and rediscuss or flesh that one out a little bit more. And if you could get back to us about that, that'd be great. So with that said, Jo, was there anything else you wanted to highlight or mention on your report?
Just one thing, like, I am committed to Plan Change 23. I understand the importance of Papakainga. My Raukawa whānau are constantly on at me. You haven't made any progress. What are you doing? You know, if I can get resourcing, it's all go. If I hadn't had Plan Change 26 this year, we would have been talking about notification in the next month or so. So not trying to make excuses. For me, this personally holds dear to my heart because of my whānau at Raukawa. And, you know, I'm committed to moving this forward. So thank you, Wayne. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Mayor, for your support on this. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Mariata.
Ka pai, Jo. Whānau.
Thank you. I've only had one coffee so far this morning, so yeah.
E te pai. Awesome. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you, Jo. It's obviously quite personal for you, and
Yeah.
for that, for your honesty about that, I thank you. So with that said, we have that recommendation on page 182 to receive Jo's report. I'm happy to move from the chair. Is somebody going to second that for me? Mayor Jim will second that for me. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
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 Against? Carried. Excellent. Thank you for your work, Jo.
Thank you for having me.
Right, so that concludes